essentially killing our neighbors. And so New York City and started to enforce a curfew. And what we found was that when we would arrive, because I started volunteering at the pantry, we lost our volunteers. So I had to start going in on Saturdays to make sure that food was, being distributed to people. What we found was that we had families standing out and breaking curfew to stand online to get the food. And when I saw that, we just decided we can't continue this way of doing the, first come, first serve model. We moved to an appointment model so that we can schedule appointments in advance so that people would not stand outside, break curfew, risk getting in trouble for that, risk sort of a negative interaction with the police, right? And so we wanted to make sure that people still got to pantry, still got their food. And so that's how we continue to operate now. We still have it on the appointment model. We serve about 8,000 to 9,000 individuals a month for food pantry. We're currently looking to expand. And so we just opened another food pantry in a school where we are the after school provider. And we've connected to some of the families that have children that go to that school so that we can make sure that they're also getting food. And then we're looking to open another food pantry in one of our other senior centers that would serve seniors and also, families from the neighborhood. Just recognizing again, that really with the eviction moratorium in place, what people really need is food. And then in terms of just our shelters, the other challenge that we had is that we knew we had homeless students. We knew our shelters were not wired for internet. The city sees the shelters as a temporary stopping place for families. And so they never allocate funding for the wiring that, can be expensive for the buildings themselves. And so we didn't have Wi-Fi in our shelters. And if students are looking to connect all of a sudden to school from their units in the shelter, they're not going to be able to do that. And we knew that. So that was another very, very big challenge. And we had to start quickly approaching. We focused very intently on trying to raise funds for that. And so we quickly started looking for foundations that will be willing to give us money essentially to wire buildings, not buildings that we own, but buildings that New York City owns, to make sure that we were able to provide Wi-Fi. And, while I'm embarrassed to say that we didn't get that set up until late April, beginning of May, what I'm horrified to think about are the number of students that live in shelters now where the city still has not been able to secure Wi-Fi for those students. And so they continue to struggle with that. So certainly, in that end, I am proud of the work that we've done at the shelters. And I'm also proud of the fact that our workforce development programs have continued to be able to place people into new jobs. While, we're not at the height of where we were making 30 to 40 employment placements a month, we're down to just 8 or 9. The fact that we're still able to find jobs for people is incredible to me. And so I'm very proud of that work as well. So I think, while we may have a very long road for recovery here in the Bronx, I'm hopeful, and I'm hopeful because I know that the Bronx is a resilient borough. People have counted the Bronx out a number of different times, and we always seem to make our way back. So I'm looking forward for being part of that for me personally and for the organization itself. So.
I mean, thank you so much. And as you were speaking, I thought, this is you, and the work that's being done is such a representation of what I see in the Bronx. And I think that your last words were exactly what I see, and that is the resilience that people didn't say, oh, we have to just shut down and we can't do this work, but they said, how are we going to do it? How are we going to pivot? Exactly what you've outlined. So thank you. And our next speaker is Dr. Judith Gill. Judith works at Children's Aid, and I think that Judith also brings with her an important acknowledgement of the fact that, and it took a little while, I think, for this to get acknowledged, that social workers are essential workers. Social workers, in many, many cases, continued to work, continued to go into offices, to continue to be close to people. So, and Judith has worked, first of all, some of her research has been in resilience, so she's perfect to have here today. But also, she's worked on mental health issues. And one of the things that we've done here at the center is to put together a series on mental health issues, because at a certain point we realized these were going to be major, major issues that people were going to be dealing with. And we're intending to continue looking at mental health issues and back to work. So Dr. Gill, thank you. And we're anxious to hear what you have to tell us about what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Eileen. And thanks for everyone that, had anything to do with getting this conference together. This is so relevant and necessary, such a necessary platform, especially during these times. Like Eileen Torres, I am also of Caribbean parents. My parents from the Dominican Republic, they came here in the 70s. And same as Eileen, dreams for their offspring, for their children, to do better than they were able to do back on the island, right? So I do have a unique story that I'll share. I always tend to share some of the personal when talking about the professional. So I came into my interest in social work came about as a result of having early interactions in my teenage years with social workers. So I was a teen parent, became a parent at 16 years of age. And so it was through the help of family, of course, and mental health professionals that I came to learn of social work and the many hats that social workers wear. So I then, went to school, went to college, got my degrees in social work. And, throughout the trajectory of my career, it's been interesting. So I've seen, so as Eileen Newman mentioned earlier, I'm wearing different hats in the field of social work these days. So I am the interim deputy director of mental health with the Children's Aid. And we have several clinics that we operate out of. And I'm also still the director of mental health at the Children's Aid in the Bronx, which is right off of 172nd Street and Southern Boulevard. So we provide services to a lot of the folks in the community. And in addition to the work that I'm doing with the Children's Aid, I am also a professor of social work and mental health at Fordham University and with York College, one of CUNY's very own. So, throughout the pandemic, I've had the sort of double lens, double perspective of how COVID impacted the communities, as well as how it's impacted the student bodies and my social work students. And so, there has been a lot that has come out of, COVID-19, obviously, and COVID has tested us in so many different ways, right? Personally, emotionally, mentally, professionally. And I can think of, as well as I'm sure all of you can think of a million ways in which the pandemic has negatively impacted our societies and our communities. But I always look at sort of the positive that has come out of this. And one of the things that has emerged, and for someone who is in mental health like me, is sort of, the words mental health became buzzwords of sorts in the last 12 months, right? We saw mental health everywhere, on billboards, in the news, on TV, right? Services provided across the board. And it almost felt like there was a sort of the stigma of receiving mental health services was sort of lifted a little bit. And we saw people coming out, a lot more than before, seeking mental health services. At the clinic, in our Bronx and our Harlem clinic, we saw a uptake in mental health referrals. People really looking to have someone to help them out, especially, so our clinic services children from the ages of 5 through 21 years of age. So that school age group, we got a lot of referrals from parents and schools just seeking services, mental health services for children and their families who are having a really hard time adjusting to the different changes, right? The abrupt change from being in a classroom today and literally working from home, being schooled from home the next day. The lack of resources. So to Eileen Torres's point, we had a similar experience with the Children's Aid. You know, we were not equipped, right, to go from being face-to-face in the clinic, providing treatment in that way to, you know, the next day providing services via telemental health, right, via video, via telephones. We quickly got our resources together, and in a matter of maybe 2.5 weeks, all of our social workers, all of our therapists, all of our psychiatrists were equipped to begin to provide services via the video platform. We are still providing services remotely. So all of our staff, all of our mental health staff is providing services from their homes. We're actually currently working at getting a permanent telemental health license through the State Office of Mental Health to continue to provide the work in this way. What we have found is that also there's been a lot more engagement with our families because they no longer have to leave their homes to engage in therapy. They can, you know, receive the treatment right out of their bedroom, right out of their living room. So that's been a huge sort of advantage that has come out of this, you know, mental health, of this public health crisis, I'm sorry. When I think about, you know, just the key words for this conference, women and resiliency. I'll go back to like what I have seen in the last 12 months, right? Just witnessing the fighting spirits of so many women, right? Trying to navigate these difficult times. I've seen mothers, right, turn into full-time teachers while balancing, you know, their jobs and so the many needs of their children. Eileen Torres, I'm thinking about you and your baby. Like, I've heard so many of those, you know, stories. You know, I've witnessed college students, right? Some of my students having to, we were literally at York College campus. I'll never forget this. That Tuesday, the 17th, I believe it was. And the very next day we get an email from the chancellor that we're going remote, right? So the many challenges with that, a lot of students didn't have the resources. Some students didn't have Wi-Fi at home. It's just, you know, so much of that stuff that we knew was there, but was really just brought up to, you know, brought up from under the rug, and we could no longer ignore it. Like, it was in our face, and what are we gonna do about it? You know, I've seen students, I've heard so many different stories from students who have had to, you know, get a second job, a third job, because a parent lost a job due to COVID, right? And what that did to them and how that affected their academics. And so for me, not only am I the director, the deputy director, the professor, I've also gotten into the role of like counseling indirectly my own social work students and even my own social work staff, right? Without crossing boundaries, of course, but being that support system for them, because I know how important it is to have someone who's going to understand how this public health crisis is really impacting all of us in different ways. And then just going back to like women, right, and our resiliency. Just, you know, I know this I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but, you know, we have found strength in each other, in community. We've laughed, I'm sure we've cried, and we've come together to discuss solutions, right? Just a few months ago, I participated in a Spanish language radio show based out of Florida. It was a national broadcast, discussing the effects of trauma in children and adolescents. And the topic of COVID came up, and we had a nice sort of 15-minute discussion that was not even part of the radio show, but we discussed COVID we explored it as a definite traumatic experience for so many of our listeners. And so that was really interesting. And so, you know, as cliche as it may sound, we as women, we continue to persevere and push through the many barriers and obstacles and challenges and odds that come our way. And, you know, as the president mentioned earlier, we're stronger when we work together, when we praise each other, when we bring others along with us, right? we're going to continue to navigate these lasting effects of COVID, and this is not going anywhere. And even after it is gone and we're all fully vaccinated and we're, it's no longer a threat the way that it is now, the after effects are going to remain, especially in our communities, the communities that we serve, especially here, in the Bronx, right? And it's going to be so important for us to continue to sort of work together, lean on each other, use our networks, use our resources, use our voices, right, to make ourselves heard, and continue to believe in ourselves and help others do the same. I think that when we work together, we're such a strong unit. I take my role as a leader in my community, in higher education, very, very seriously. And I take great pride in being able to service my community directly and indirectly, directly by providing services and making sure that the community is being served and the mental health needs are being served, but also in training those future mental health professionals that are going to be doing the same in years to come, right? The field of social work, we all know, it's dominated by women, right? And on a daily basis, I'm in a position to raise and uplift women to be our future leaders. In my interactions with my managers and the different social work line staff that I supervise, I try my very best to build them, to encourage them, to inspire them, and to have them, understand and believe that their voices matter and that their opinions matter, that their ideas matter. Because with social work, if you're a social worker and your voice is silenced and you're not using your voice, you won't be able to service your client population effectively. So I take my role as a mentor, as a leader, insert adjective, very, very seriously. And I know that I've been talking a lot, but I'll end with these last few thoughts for all the women here, for those that are coming up, and even for those of us that have been, have been doing our work for a very long time. It's important that, we continue to remain resilient, that we lean on other women, that we seek those positive role models, right? That we use our networks, as I mentioned earlier, that we create connection. And connection is so important, especially during a time where we're isolated, right? I mean, things are getting lifted a little by little, but we're still sort of living in our own bubbles. And it's very easy to just kind of stay there. So, again, the importance of just creating connections and something, and just pushing, and this is a social worker in me, just pushing through those negative thoughts and seeking the help if you feel that you need it. And those negative thoughts that tell us that, we're not good enough, I don't belong here, I don't belong at the table. Yes, you do, right? And working through that. And just, you belong, you can do it, don't stress, do the best that you can on a daily basis. Go out there. I love using this particular phrase. Go out there, throw glitter in today's face and make it happen. And that's what I have for you. Thank you. I think you're muted.
You're on mute.
Judith, thank you so much. And I love the glitter idea. So I think that everyone, when they have to go back into their office, should go with glitter and throw some glitter. So, and the last of our keynotes is Patricia Quinn. I actually met Patricia. I was looking for somebody who was a nurse, essential worker. And I met her through a woman I've known for years, who's a filmmaker nurse. And she said, you have to talk to Patricia, who is at Lenox Hill Hospital. She's in she's a nurse manager and lots of other things in the neonatal health department. But she is exactly an example of a woman who was called to be a leader in a different way. And I hope, Patricia, in your conversation with us, you mentioned what your mother said to you when you went to her. Okay, great. So Patricia is sort of, in some ways, a poster child of the people that we all applauded every night at 7 o'clock. So Patricia, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that. I honestly am honored and humbled to be a part of this distinct panel. A little bit of background on me. I am a registered nurse. I have been a registered nurse for about 10 years now. And I am currently the nurse manager of the neonatal ICU at Lenox Hill and the assistant director of nursing for the maternal child health division. But obviously this year has been a very different year for healthcare and for the hospitals. And early in March, actually this year, this week we celebrated our first a year since our first COVID patient in the hospital. This Monday was a year. And very quickly throughout the pandemic, the beginning peak, we kind of converted our entire hospital into COVID. So initially we had one unit that was COVID, and as we continue now, we have 2 units in the hospital that are COVID, but during the peak of COVID, we had 1 unit with 20 patients in the hospital that was non-COVID, and every other patient in the hospital, 400 plus patients, were COVID positive. So we very quickly had to pivot and find a way to support these patients that were just constantly coming in and were very, very sick. And we were asked really to think differently and to look at things differently and to think about our skills differently. And in the beginning of April, I was approached by my director and asked to run a pop-up COVID medical ICU. And I, of course, said yes. I had been called upon, and I felt very strongly that I wanted to be able to help in any way that I can and lend whatever talents that I had to help the patients that were coming in. And I was asked that on a Wednesday, and the unit was to open on a Thursday. So Wednesday, I went up to see this, what had been office space that had been turned completely into a 15-bedded medical ICU for the sickest COVID patients in our hospital, where they were planning to go there, and to just walk the floor and figure out if we had all the supplies that we needed, if the rooms were doable, and what we could move and manage. And then I went home with the intention of seeing our first patient 24 hours later. And I said to Eileen, and I went home and I called my mom, and I was hysterically crying on the phone with my mom. And she was like, "What is wrong?" And I was like, "They just asked me to run this COVID medical ICU, and I'm so honored and humbled, and I want to help, and I'm not afraid of COVID. I think we have the resources that we need, and we have fought pandemics before." I said, "But I am afraid that I'm not the right person for this." And I said, "I have always, my whole career has been with babies, and I am very skilled at that, and I am very confident at that. And in my unit, I consider myself to be a clinical expert and someone that my team comes to with questions and a need for advice and suggestions. And I have no clinical knowledge of adults at all, except from nursing school 10 years ago. And so I was like, I'm just afraid that I won't be able to support the team in the way that they need. And I want the team to have the best, and I want the patients to have the best. And if that's not me, that's okay. But I'm afraid that I was picked for this and that I'm not the right person." And my mom, very wise and very calmly, said, "Patricia, you know how to lead. And that's what they need. They need a leader. They don't need you to be the clinical expert. They don't need you to know what drip the patient needs to go on, or what rate it has to run at, or what ventilatory mode the patient needs. They need you to support them. They need you to get them the resources that they need. They need you to advocate for them. And they need you to be present. And those are all things that you know how to do." And honestly, no truer words were spoken, I was so taken aback. And I said, you're right. I do know how to do that. And I have done that throughout my career. And I went in the next day with that in mind, and then spent the next couple months running a COVID medical ICU and just being there. And that's what I did. I tasked myself every day to be present and to always advocate for them and to get them the resources that they needed and to listen to the staff and to give them what they needed support wise outside of nursing and outside of medicine, being someone to hear them and to let them know that they are recognized and they are seen, and that they are doing important work, even if it is challenging, and it definitely was very challenging, but that they were really making a difference in the lives of these patients and their families. And then really looking at the families and finding ways to support them. We in COVID stopped all visitation, and that was, I do think that was necessary. It was a very, very hard decision from a person that is a staunch patient and family advocate. And I think the family members really are a part of the care team. And I tell my parents in the NICU that all the time, that, they are just as much a part of the care team as the neonatologist and as the nurse. They know their baby. And I think people know their family members. So finding a way to have the family not physically be present, but still be a part of the care team. And we did that through technology. We had patient tablets that the family called on every day and spoke to a member of the team about what the plan was and any questions, and used this amazing app called Playback that actually recorded all of those conversations so that the family could play it back and hear it again, and also could share it with other members of their family, and share it from the clinician's perspective, which I think is so important in terms of translation of what's going on to family members. I think a lot of times for all of us in stressful situations, you only process a portion of what is being said. And so to be able to go back and listen to it again and hear it again, I think is really important. But I also think to also be able to have that vehicle to share that information with family members, so that it's not, me as my sister calling my mom and saying, this is what I think is going on, but I don't necessarily have a full understanding. And they can really hear it from the clinician side as well, which I think is important. So we leaned on a lot of technology, but more than that, I think what for me was so important, and what continues to be important, was the resilience and the camaraderie and the teamwork that you saw happen in the hospital. People that had never worked together, had never met each other before, became these families and became these tremendous teams of support for these patients to give them the absolute best care that we could possibly give them, and called resources that they knew, and said, we really need this. Could you provide us with this? And I think, outside of the hospital, for us as providers, the 7 p.m. we called it clappy hour. The 7 p.m. clappy hour was so inspiring for us. And it was just a way for, we felt so, I'm getting chills right now, actually thinking about it. We felt so supported by the community. And that was the way that we were able to have the resiliency to come back the next day, and to provide the exact same care, and to do that day in and day out. And I live in a small apartment building here on the Upper East Side, and I have a little patio outside of my bedroom. And every once in a while, I would go out there for clappy hour. And I really met the people that lived in my building that I had never met before. And this beautiful woman, Judith, who lives on the second floor, who's lived there her whole life. And this woman, Suzanne, who lives on the third floor. And Suzanne would play New York every night, which was amazing. But then they became a secondary support system for me. My family was on Long Island, and I Zoomed with them a lot and called them a lot. But technology, seeing people is definitely not the same as seeing them in person. And Suzanne would make me dinner and leave it outside my apartment door, and Judith would hang little candies on my door. So the support of the community and the support of the women around me was tremendous. And that kind of brought me as a leader here to bring that back to my team and to find ways to make sure that they were fed, and they weren't worrying about going home after an exhausting 13-hour shift and having to worry about what am I going to eat tomorrow, or meal prepping, because really at that point all that people had the resiliency for was to like shower and go to bed and wake up and come back the next day. So the support of the community and reaching out to them was tremendous. And then that really is my biggest thing now, continuing as we move into what people are calling the new normal or a post-COVID world. I don't know that we'll ever really get to a post-COVID world, to be honest. But now the hospital has started to convert into, we only have 2 COVID units now, and the rest of the hospital is back to regular operations. And the biggest thing that I learned as I became the last COVID unit that was standing in the hospital before this second peak at the end of last summer. So I have a unique perspective in that the community support kind of dwindled. And not that I don't think the support was still there. I do think that it is still there. But, I think going through a height of a pandemic is one thing. And then people are getting tired and also going back to work and having to live their regular lives. And I felt, and my team felt forgotten, and they felt that the rest of the hospital had kind of moved on with back to normal operations, and they still were going in to fight COVID every day. And that was really, really difficult. And now the 2 units that are standing, I am back now in the NICU with my team in the NICU, which is amazing. But I really make it a real point to make sure that we as a hospital and as a unit, I focus on this in my unit a lot, are recognizing the COVID units and just letting them know that we know that they are there. We know that they are fighting the good fight. We know that the work continues to be hard. And we're here to support them. We're here to listen to them. We're here to recognize them. This past month, we actually sent them meals and sent them cards, and the feedback that we got from them about the cards was so tremendous. Just, crying that, people still remember that we're here and that we're in the height of it. And it's not the height to everyone, but when you're going into COVID every day, it still is the height of it. And we definitely have improved in terms of our resources and in terms of what we know about COVID, and there is hope. When we got the vaccine at the hospital, I said it was the greatest and only Christmas present I ever wanted. And it was a shot of hope. You felt like you were being injected with hope, like there was light at the end of the tunnel, and that we will move through this and we will get through this. So I continue to be humbled and grateful for the growth of this past year. And it was gut-wrenching, and there was a lot of death. And I, as a nurse, we're so used to winning. And because most of the time you do, and I think in healthcare, the medical team would echo that. We're so used to winning, and we just, we lost a lot. And that was really hard as a caretaker to deal with, that the loss was so profound and so often. So I think it became even more important to lift each other up, to support each other, and to have forums like this where healthcare providers can talk about it, because the amazing thing about memory is that it's not a constant, and it's something that you actually are constantly changing in your brain. And so if you put things around anniversaries and things around experiences, you can change the way that that looks. So while I remember a lot of loss and a lot of negativity, we actually had a remembrance service this week, and I was with people that I had led with, and we just talked about what great and amazing things came out of COVID. I think a true recognition of the disparity of care for Black and Brown people, and how we need to make work to fix that, and how we're not looking for equality, and equality will not solve the problem. Treating everyone the same will not solve the problem. We need to place different care plans around those members of our community so that they get the service that they need. And it's not the same as their white counterparts, and giving them the same is not enough. And so we really need to look at that, and we need to fix that, and being able to support each other through these experiences, and knowing that we can do better. And I think that has been tremendous for me. And then I'll just close on one of the greatest lessons that I think I learned was to give yourself some grace, that you're not going to be a superhuman, and you're not going to get it all right all the time. But I think having a mentality of growth and an openness to knowing that you don't have the answers to everything, but being willing to listen, and learn, and sometimes learn that you're wrong, and can do better. But to know that you are coming into it with the thought that you are trying to do better, and to give yourself that grace that your best effort right now is enough.
Patricia, if we were, I do this every year, so it's only a matter of when, not if. And I knew it would be you.
Oh.
If we were in a room, we would all be standing and applauding you now.
Oh, thank you.
You know, we heard a lot on the news from people doing your work and little news spots, but not the way you've made us feel like we were there with you and in your mind. And I think you took us through the whole trajectory of the reaction to the 7 o'clock applause and the community. So I can't thank you enough. It's a real privilege to have had you here.
Oh, it is absolutely my honor. And like I said, Eileen, when you reached out to me initially, I really am truly honored and humbled to even be noticed in this way. Well,
thank you. And also thank you to your mother, who's obviously awesome and who we all love now. So please tell her that she had a room full of people who think she's wonderful. So,
I absolutely will. Thank you.
Thank you. So these amazing people would have been a whole day if we could have had them. So, but we're going to take a breath, and I'm going to explain the next part of the experience of today. And that is what we call pop-up table talks. So what we're going to be doing is we have now 14, because unfortunately we lost one of our speakers because she had a dental emergency. 14 women who have been asked to, for 3 minutes, answer 3 questions. 1, what do you do? 2, why do you do it? What's your name? What do you do? And why do you do it? So we've asked people to just keep it for 3 minutes. And then after that, and we'll explain how that process works. After we do that, and there are women you'll see from all different walks of life who are doing all different amazing things. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things, as I mentioned at the beginning. And then we're going to give you an opportunity to do some speed getting to know each other in breakout rooms, because if we were in person, then we would have a big lunch where you could all network. So we're going to have to do that in a different way. But thank you, a million thank yous for our 3 first speakers, who I hope can stay around with us for as long as possible. And we're going to start and I know that Patricia's a tough person to follow, but if anybody can follow her, it's our first pop-up speaker, who is Adelsa Mendez. And Adelsa is the wonderful Adelsa, is a development manager at Hostos Community College. And I needed half a page for everything Adelsa does, and we didn't have half a page. So she's going to tell us about everything in 3 minutes, who she is, what she does, and why she does it. But she's everywhere. So have fun with Adelsa.
Let me unmute myself. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Eileen, for inviting me. I mean, it's been a long year, and we started planning this last year, but I'm so happy that we finally together. And so we had 3 minutes. So let me. I'm the development officer. Like Eileen said, my job is to raise funds for scholarship at Hostos Community College. But that's just my title. Let me tell you why I do it, because they told me why. And so let me tell you why I do what I do. So for me, Hostos, the students at Hostos are part of my family. The majority of students, they come from the community where I live. And I was also a student myself at Hostos. And that's why I take the holistic approach to the work that I do. I know how much education has changed my life and the trajectories of my family and the legacy of my family. And as a first generation, the first person to came to this country by myself. And so every opportunity I receive, I always, it's always about finding resources and dollars to help transform the students' family legacy. I link my integrity, my credibility for possibilities. That's what I do. So let me now talk about Adelsa at home. Like I said before, I'm part of this community. I had been blessed to own one of the 400 landmarks, brownstone in the Mahaven historical district. And so in 2018, I partnered with Enfoco, an art organization that organize, they create a fellowship for young artists. Hello, I think my computer went off. So, hi, okay. So I'm gonna start over. So I partnered with Enfoco, and Enfoco is an art organization that I lent my house for young people to showcase their work. So I have an art gallery. So we started doing this in 2018. So we did it last year. So as many of you know, the Mahaven has been a highly gentrified neighborhood. So I want people to don't feel displaced. And the name of the first exhibit was Mi Casa es Su Casa. And basically, I want people to feel inclusive and not displaced. And that's one of the work that I do besides my work at Hostos. But that's pre-COVID. We were able to host the exhibit last year. It was a virtual exhibit, but we did it. So January 2020 was the last big organized event. The Women's March was the last big event in New York City. And I took the co-chair volunteer position 5 weeks prior to the march, and we just couldn't let the women in New York City down. So we have over 350,000 people attending to the march. That was the last big event. But I feel like this challenge prepared me for the unexpected 2020. And that's why as soon as the pandemic hit, the mother in me came alive. And that's why we were also organizing our big event, our big gala, but then we have to shift priorities. And in so basically we have to shift the priorities from dollars to survival. And that's when I partnered with the World Central Kitchen, a local restaurant, My Haven Bar and Grill, and also with the Bronx Community Relief effort to serve over 8,000 meals to Hostos students. Not only Hostos students, the partnership started for Hostos, but then we opened it for every CUNY students and also from people in the community. And we served over 8,000 meals from April to September. So this is what we only have 3 minutes, but basically that's what I've been doing. What I do now is, I want to ask all of you, if you are in a job, to ask yourself, what is your highest purpose? And I live in the Bronx, but whatever community you are, if you're opening the doors, your casa, to share your gift, especially and the resources that you have with other people, especially to help the youth. And if you don't know how to do that, you can give me a call. I can give you some ideas. Hostos can use your help. And also, how are you using your integrity and lending your credibility to create opportunities and possibility for others? And that's what I wanted to share in my 3 minutes today. And thank you, Eileen, for the opportunity.
Adelsa, thank you. And I love the idea. I'm going to have this in my mind now of Adelsa at work and Adelsa at home. So thank you so much. And our next speaker is Esmeralda Herrera, who is, I'll let Esmeralda tell you about her, the opportunity she gives to new entrepreneurs in the Bronx and the work that she's doing. I don't know what that sound. And the work that she's doing to build new entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurs of the future. So Esmeralda, you.
Thank you so much, Eileen, and the Center for the Bronx Nonprofits for having me. And I'm delighted to be here with so many resilient women, right, change makers. So my name is Esmeralda, and Director of Programs and Community Relations at Community Ties America, a small but mighty team of 6. So we're a nonprofit with a vision of supporting change makers to create an inclusive, equitable, and sustainable local community. We build inclusive impact ecosystems made of BIPOC and women change makers who are helping to create an equitable local economies in historically under-resourced communities. So it's about building individual, family, and generational wealth through economic independence. And we do this in 2 ways. One is through our social impact accelerator programs, where we provide social entrepreneurs with mentorship, funding, and community for their thriving businesses. And 2, Hayground, which is more than just a building, but an innovation hub that envisions a more just and inclusive Bronx, right, with opportunities like a co-working, co-designing, and co-executing ideas led by Bronx locals. Hayground cultivates an ecosystem of innovation, entrepreneurship, and community. It catalyzes a broad network of peers, partners, and founders who form a community of support, expertise, and resource. I'm born and raised in the Bronx, and I went to public high school here. I mean, like, I think there's so much sometimes negative things that folks can talk about the Bronx. But I say these following things not because they're quote unquote bad things, but because they're facts, you know? Like, I've had principals arrested, my high school closed down, right? We had one of the lowest attendance in the whole New York City. But all of living here and being in the Bronx, and from the Bronx, that a lot of the women here connect with has made me who I am, right? And I am so incredibly proud to be scrappy, to be resilient, to be creative, to be strong. And this borough, this community, right, this mix of cultures is the best, I think, that I've seen of social entrepreneurship. It's someone who not only wants to create community wealth, but solve a social issues. And that's like what we do, right? The entrepreneurs that we serve, they're Bronx principals, they're teachers, they're engineers, they're scientists, they're caseworkers, they're urban farmers, they're doctors, like you name it. You know, and they've lived through the issue, and they not only want to solve it, they're actually solving it. We have proudly provided a total of $78,000 in grants to our community, and you need to hear their ideas. You know, 3 minutes is too short to do justice. So if you check out our website, you'll see them all. And they receive things, you know, marketing consultation, law consultations, etc. But I think to define my why, so that's what I do, right? To define my why, I wanted to define resilience and how I see it in my life, because that's how I supported entrepreneurs in the Bronx, and, you know, why I do this. So for me, resilience is I'm impatient for action. I believe challenges invigorate teams. I feel compelled to present the facts or the truth, no matter how unpleasant they may be. I like to push others to take risk and speak their minds. And although I believe only action can lead to performance, I don't believe that action and thinking are opposites. And like ultimately, I believe I will not be judged. I will be judged not by what I say, not by what I do, but what I get. And I expect things to change. And many times it energizes me, and I look forward to it. And I look forward to it and face up, you know, life's unpleasantness. And so resilience may look different for you, and that's a good thing. And I hope you can define it for yourself and how you've seen it in your own life. So I leave you with some parting words that we've shared with our entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are expected to accomplish more than is humanly possible with less than is humanly conceivable. So, and I believe that you're all strong for the challenge. So thank you so much.
Oh, Esmeralda, thank you. And I love the idea of being scrappy, but also I think that that's also a definition of nonprofit leaders. So that goes out to everybody on this call, and most people on this call. Our next speaker is Geraldine Rodriguez, and Geraldine runs a very interesting organization. And I host, some of you know, I host a show on BronxNet, and during the course of our conversation on that show, Geraldine taught me what a hotspot is, because I'm embarrassed to say I had no idea what people were talking about when they talked about hotspots. So that's one of Geraldine's great talents. So Geraldine.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for having me. I love the fact that most of us are from or serving the Bronx, and I love the Hostos presence, because you'll hear from my story, like some of the women that have inspired me, but it really starts with my mom, and my mom is a Hostos graduate, and she's literally the reason why I'm here. So my name is Geraldine Rodriguez. I'm the co-founder and CEO at The Knowledge House. And The Knowledge House is a startup nonprofit located in the South Bronx in the Mott Haven area. And we provide technical job training to youth and young adults across New York City. And the reason why I'm doing this work is because I believe in multiple pathways for low-income people so that they're successful. You know, I always tell people, like, college worked for me, but college did not work for a lot of my family members and peers growing up in the Bronx. And so I believe that alternative pathways is so important. And it just so happens that the tech sector is growing. There are a lot of high paying jobs in tech that do not require a college degree. And as you can imagine, since COVID, the need to provide digital skills training has been more important than ever. And so that's what we do at the Knowledge House. Our mission is to empower and sustain a talent pipeline of technologists coming from low-income communities. And I actually started this work because years ago, now 7 years ago, my last job before the Knowledge House, I was running a political campaign for someone named Reshma Saujani. And in 2012, she was running for public advocate of New York City. And at the time, she was also the founder and CEO of Girls Who Code. And that was like my first experience and exposure to a woman entrepreneur who was not a technologist, but was still making a difference in the community and providing exposure to these high paying jobs and these economic opportunities to girls. And that inspired me. I thought, you know, I'm not a technologist, but I'm really passionate about career pathways, and I've seen how technology transforms things, and I would love to be a part of that. And so she inspired me to be an entrepreneur myself and to launch the Knowledge House with my co-founder, who I actually met on the campaign trail when I was working for Reshma Saujani. And so I've always been inspired by women. I let y'all know about my mother, who's the reason why I'm here, and Reshma Saujani, who empowered me to become an entrepreneur myself. And literally following Esmeralda, like I can't support the idea of entrepreneurship more, right? Like literally, women are the ones that can make a difference. And so whether you're an entrepreneur or in nonprofit leadership, keep going. I'm really empowered and motivated by this group, and I'm here to support everyone. So we are just a few blocks away from Hostos, and hopefully we're all in person so that we can connect face to face. Thank you.
Geraldine, thank you so much. You do amazing work, and little by little, I'm now beginning to understand the work you do. So that's also great. Thank you. So our next speaker is a shift in gears because our next speaker is Maria Castanis. And some of you took her workshop on wellness and did yoga with Maria. I met Maria standing online to check out of a hotel in Costa Rica, and then realized we live 10 blocks from each other. So, so I have seen Maria with shift gears and prepared to shift gears even further. But she'll tell you her story. So Maria, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. And again, very honored to be part of this, this guest panel and speakers. I've been very inspired. So my name is Maria Castanis, and I'm a commercial real estate lender. I'm in banking, but I'm also a certified yoga teacher, which I just got certification about 4 years ago. So the reason I'm a commercial real estate lender is and why this combination is, I actually started my life out as a ballet dancer. I'm a born and bred New Yorker. I was born in Brooklyn, raised in Queens, and I live in Manhattan now. And dance was always a big part of my life, but being also from an immigrant family, Greek American family, I was going to college, and my parents, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And I was pretty good in math academically. So by the time college came, my parents were not having the ballet dancer career. So go figure, I went for accounting. It was a practical career. Midway through my studies, I said, I don't want to do this. I can't do this. So I came out of school, and making a long story short, I ended up in the real estate business. The reason I like it and why I do it is because it's about community. As much as we're the ones providing the money and not really building the building, my connections with developers and their vision in communities is really been very rewarding to me. In fact, in the mid-90s, when The banks I worked for were very Manhattan centric. I was the one that raised my hand and said, hey, what about the other boroughs? You know, people out in the other boroughs have visions and need new buildings. And I remember I was one of the first to start recommend building in Harlem and in the Bronx and in Brooklyn and in places where some nicer, newer buildings were not going up, but developers wanted to build there, but weren't getting support from commercial banks. So I was very proud to be part of that movement, which started to explode, obviously, as you've seen the city explode throughout the years. I was also in a very male-dominated business that was challenging. Wasn't easy being a woman doing what I do. Pushed down a lot, pushed around a lot, but my network was huge, and my saving grace was yoga. I started going to yoga as just a stretch class. I mean, it wasn't hard for me because I did ballet, and you know, after the gym, oh, we'd take the yoga class. But then I realized this yoga thing made me feel really, really calm, and my state of mind was really even when I came out of class. And I started to read a little bit more about it and take some workshops. I'd been up to Kripalu, and I needed my breaks. I did yoga retreats and learned more and more about it. And the more I learned about it, I thought, well, maybe I'll do a yoga teacher training. I did not expect to teach at all. I expected to just deepen my knowledge and my practice. But I think two things made me want to teach, actually three. One of them happened during the pandemic. One was the day after my teacher training, I went to my chiropractor and I stopped having lower back pain from just doing so much yoga. And he said, come in here and he took an x-ray of my back, which we do annually to just see what was going on. He goes, something phenomenal is going on here. I said, what? And he goes, there's a lot of space in between your vertebrae. I said, that's a good thing, right? He said, yeah. He goes, and there's a lot of bone growth going on there. And at the time I was 58 years old, I'm 62 now. He said, that just doesn't happen at your age. I said, well, that's the yoga. And that was a real enlightenment for me to want to spread that around, because yoga, I want to make yoga accessible to people who think they can't do it. As many of you might have participated in my workshop, it's not about standing on your head or doing a back bend or folding in a pretzel. It's about getting peace of mind, centering yourself, and getting blood flow into areas of your body to give you the mind, body, spirit. The pandemic was actually not only difficult, but also I got to expand my work by being able to do it early. In fact, I just was teaching this morning, and I teach early morning to people. I do workshops with people. I do individual lessons with people in my building here on the Upper West Side. And my being able to give back and help people feel good has been enormously rewarding. So I'll conclude by saying, I think the key thing with finding what you love every day is not is finding your passions, but also being realistic with your talents. You know, I'd love to be a singer like Meredith. That's what I would love to do more than anything, but I don't have talent in that. I did have talent in movement. I did have talent in math, and you know, being able to be realistic and find your talents and sorry, my phone is ringing. And finding those two things can help bring huge rewards in your work. Thank you so much.
Maria, thank you. That's great to have us all for a minute think about our talents and how we can use them. So thank you. And our next speaker, Lisa, are you here? Okay, we're going to skip over, and we'll get her later.
Lisa Soren?
Yeah.
Yep, I'm right here.
Oh, you are. Okay. Yeah. So great, Lisa, because we weren't sure. So
what is your name? I'm so sorry, I couldn't find you.
Oh, it's under the new BXCC.
Oh, that's why. So
Uh-huh.
Lisa, and some of you might know her, is the president of the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, who is a mighty fighter for the Bronx and a really fun person to hang out with. I have to, have to add that. So Lisa, you're up.
Thank you so very much. I have to say, I have missed this conference for a couple of years, and I am just in awe of the women who have been speaking, of the women who are on. So I know I have 3 minutes, and hi, Kathy. So I put my timer on, so I'll make sure to stay on my 3 minutes. So my name is Lisa Soren, president of the Bronx Chamber of Commerce. Eileen, thank you, and thank you to the team who have allowed me to participate. So who am I? Definitely not a singer, not a dancer, but I am all about the empowerment of entrepreneurs, the empowerment of business. I have been in the business industry, you could say basically my entire life. I'm so young, so it's just like a few years. But, you know, my dad was a small business owner. And I think over the course of the years, I was always drawn, born in the Bronx, Old Lincoln Hospital, like one of the previous speakers had said. But my dad took us to Westchester County to be raised. I always had this curiosity about what the Bronx really was as we used to visit family. And it drew me. So when I graduated high school, did a couple of years in business school, I moved to the Bronx. Everybody thought I was crazy, and I've never left. Because the Bronx has a unique sense of family, and I saw the businesses. I started working for a company in Hunts Point back in the late 80s, early 90s, which was a eye-opening shocker to what was there. But I knew that that's where my parents had met. Started working with businesses and just developed this sense of love for community more than I ever had, the sense of partnership. I've always worked in a male-dominated industry. I mean, I'm the first woman president for the Bronx Chamber of Commerce. And I think I've always said it's a year of the women. I think more than ever now, like our previous speakers, you're talking about women taking the forefront at essential workers and health and business, entrepreneur, art. You know, it all goes hand in hand because it's all a level of business on one end or the other. I have the privilege of taking on this position after serving 15 years on their board of directors, given the opportunity. I think the fact that Hostos is the one that is hosting this means the world to me, because one of the very first things I did when I started on the board of directors of this organization was start a scholarship program for young women to celebrate women's history. You know, it's not a lot of money, but it's about acknowledging those beautiful, see, my 3 minutes are up and I'm not even halfway through. Empowering young women who are doing excellent work across our borough. And we have an opportunity to have them write essays and really speak to their successes as young women. We celebrate the theme, which this year is refusing to be silenced. And I think this conference in of itself speaks to that as women. We have been blessed that the message, we're in our 15th year. When I started this program, we had 3 scholarship winners this year. COVID, not COVID, people realizing that the family unit, we are awarding 21 young ladies, which is heartwarming and loving, and it speaks to the fact of the representation of our young ladies coming up. I can speak forever, but I will tell you this, you know, there's so many careers, you're right, where education is not needed, or, you know, there's just the intellect of what women bring to the table as mothers and wives and students and business owners. But a cute little story, I have 2 beautiful young ladies, daughters, and I think I had told Eileen this story, and I only had an associate's for years, but I am a huge advocate of education. My sister's a principal and a teacher, my brother's a teacher. And I remember me just pushing my daughters about education. And my little one, when she was 10, who's now 20, said to me, you know, Mom, you talk so much about education, but you don't even have degrees. So why should we? You know, and that was a eye-opening experience. So, and she was right? You lead by example. So I went back to school, and I'm in my 50s, proudly say it. And I just got my degree less than 8 years ago, both my bachelor's and my master's. And I did it just because my daughters needed to know that I walk the talk. And, you know, I have one who graduated college, the other one finishing. But all to say is that sometimes it takes us a long way to get where we want to. You know, we talk, we empower, we network. And networks like this is what's brought me to the passion of sharing whatever knowledge I have. And I have two daughters who are coming up behind me, and hearing you ladies and hearing my story, their story, is really what this is all about. Happy Women's Empowerment Month. And I think it should be a year-round process. And thank you for the honor of being here with you today.
Oh, Lisa, I'm so glad you could be here and so glad you could speak. I know we've been circling around this because Lisa runs a wonderful conference also, and it's always on the same day. So
Yeah.
now I'm going to be able to go to hers, and she happily could join us. So thank you.
Thank you.
And our next speaker is Monica Major. And Monica is the Director of Education and Youth Services for the Bronx Borough President. But in addition, Monica does tons of other things in the community, and she's actually, I think, in a school now, and she's found a place to be able to do this while she's working on giving out computers in a school. So Monica, she's able to get on.
On. Thank you. Can you all hear me? Hold on. Okay.
No.
It's a little funny, Monica. It's because it's a little like, you know what? If you're not on video, we might be able to hear you.
Yeah. And it's a new phone that I just got yesterday.
This is better. Yeah, that's cool. We like to see you, but then we can't hear you.
That's and it's a pleasure to see so many faces that I know. So hi, Kathy. It's good to see you. So what do? I have the title of Director of Education and Youth Services for the Bronx, and I've been doing that now for Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz for 10 years. What's unique about it is that 10 years ago was the first time, was my first foray into politics and working for an elected official. Previous to that, I'd worked for the state of New York as a training and development professional. So coming to the Bronx, where I live, where I work, where I grew up, and learning that my role now is to just serve the people of the Bronx. It's been an incredible 10 years as a public servant for the people here. And I say that joyously. It still is, it remains hard work. But I feel blessed that I got a chance to do this in my lifetime. Mostly I focused around, as Eileen said, schools, but more importantly, I focus around families, parents, and students. And being that education is really under the domain of the Bronx, of the mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, you're good.
So with mayoral control, the borough president's office has very limited role in terms of policy. But what we do have the ability to do is to advocate and advocate strongly and advocate, for our families. And that's what we do. We can give our own opinion about the policies that the Department of Education has, but we don't control what they decide to do ultimately. how did I do this? How did I get into this? Well, I got into it just advocating for my daughter, and Lisa and I have daughters around the same age. My daughter's now a sophomore. So I started doing this work when she was a kindergartner, and I decided that, hey, I'm not going to have anybody in control of my daughter's education. I'm going to partner with whoever, whatever educator, what their role is. So I started to volunteer on the community level, the Community Education Council, which is the local school board. And we were advocating again for stronger and better mayoral control. So I met the borough president on his very last day as the assembly member. I met the borough president on the very last day that he was an assembly member, and he had just been elected to borough president. And because our previous borough president was going on to the Obama administration. So I remember that day distinctly because I walked up to him and said, and introduced myself. And he was serving on the assembly, and the Bronx was hosting a committee that day. Anyway, so from there, we crossed each other, and throughout the years, and then finally a position opened in his office, and he asked me to come on. The reason I tell that story, and I tell it to parents and all the time, is because they want. I advocate for parents in leadership roles, and they want to do that. And I think we've got some great parents who can do this work. But I always say to them, do the work, because in the work, you will find the people in your path who will support that work and who will be there for you and will help move you along. And so that's what I do now. I really feel strongly about growing mothers and fathers as leaders, as educational partners with their local institutions, their local, whether it's an elementary school, college. And that's what I like to do. That's what I hope I'll do this borough president. This is his last year. So I hope I'm going to continue to do that work, whether it's with the next borough president, or looking to do this again on my own and out in the community. I think this is what I'm going to be. This is my third or fourth life. And I think this is the one I'm going to continue on with. I like to say I am the epitome of resiliency. I have, as a single parent here in the Bronx, raising 2 kids, I have been through it all. I tell people there's not much, left to do to scare me. And I know what it's like to be here and just feel that it's just you all the time. And we need to be able to support our single mothers and our single fathers. They are struggling. And I'm going to continue to just do that work. And I am going to have to jump off because the borough president, I am in a school doing a visit, and he's inside. We have a team inside, but we're going to move on. We have 2 other schools today. So I'm sorry, I'm going to miss the second part of the program. And Eileen, I promise I will be back here every year. I happen to miss it also because something conflicts, but I will be here. And thank you. It's just a pleasure to be amongst all you women. I really appreciate this.
Monica, thank you so much. It's great. It's great to see you this way, but hopefully we'll be able to get together real soon. The next speaker is somebody I've known for more than 50 years and 9 months. So, and when I started to think about the women I wanted to have speak today, and women using their voices, and in her case, using her body, I thought, I need to have my wonderful daughter, because she has not only, well, she'll tell you, not only physically done things that that I think are extraordinary and that I can't do, but also had started a movement during the Trump administration that really grew. So this is my beloved love of my life, Sydney Didier.
Thank you, Mom. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here. As my mom said, I do things with my body. Namely, I am an open water swimmer and swim coach. And I do what's called long distance open water swimming. So anything from 3 miles to 10 miles to 15 miles of swimming. I prefer to kind of do longer distances in exotic locations. So the thing that I'm sort of known for the most is swimming around the island of Culebra, which is off the coast of Puerto Rico. It's an island, it's sort of a sister island to Vieques. And I also have done a 20-mile swim along the length of Lake LBJ, which is in Texas. And for that swim, I raised several $1,000s for the Texas Civil Rights Project, as at a time that they were really working on family separation and getting legal representation for every family that had a child in detention or a family member in detention. And so that's one part of who I am. And my focus as a swimmer is, and as a coach, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Swimming is a typically completely segregated sport, and the history of inequities and lack of access to water and aquatic facilities and swim instruction in Black and Brown communities is well documented. But that's not the main reason I'm here today. And excuse me, I have Zoomed like 3 times. So if I screw this up, I don't swim coach by Zoom. So pardon me if I'm a little glitchy. The real reason I think my mom asked me here is so that I could talk about the reasons I'm thankful for Donald Trump. And there was one very big reason. Election day 2016 was my husband's birthday, and it was really the worst birthday he's ever had. I remember waking up at 3 a.m. and saying, I had this horrible dream and I dreamt that he won. And my husband turned to me and said, and so like a lot of people, I spent the next many days crying and feeling panicked and, having this sense of impending doom and anxiety. And one of the ways that I've typically dealt with a lot of stressful situations is through humor. And so I started trying to reframe how I was viewing the situation. And I decided that I was going to make Donnie my pen pal. So a few days after the election, I started writing him postcards, and I called it Postcards to Donald. And I started writing him just about my thoughts. And I would say, hi, Don, and I'd write little poems or silly little things, or I'd write about, something that was happening in a current event or something I was angry about. And my goal was not to, I could have written, every card could have said, you big jerk, or something more profane. But that was not my goal. I wanted it to be conversational and sort of to give myself a way to purge, so I would write about a series of issues, and I would write anywhere between, 1 to sometimes 10 cards a day. And I would mail them all, every single one. And the reason I chose postcards was because I knew that letters would be inspected in a different kind of way. But postcards were highly visible. I used, lots of colors, and it meant that every person along the way could read them too. So it meant that they were going from my house, to the White House mailroom, where I sort of had this vision of kind of a subversive mailroom staffer secretly loving them and collecting them, and and what I started to do was to post them on a Facebook group, just kind of as a lark, because I was posting them on my personal Facebook and people were really responding. And so I started posting them in a specific group, and it started to explode. People were so stressed and so anxious and so feeling helpless that they started to really react to them. And I started to get an influx of messages and, people talking to me about, this is the first time I've been able to laugh since the election, and now I can fight. And we started to build actions into the cards. I asked other people to contribute, things that they had written, or to join the Postcards to Voters campaigns that were going on around the country as the years went by. And I continued to write every single day. Until inauguration day, I missed 3 days total. Until this inauguration, I missed 3 days total. And that was from everywhere in the world. If I traveled, I brought cards and markers, and it was a little irritating for my family. And we started to build this community of people who were supportive, who would send me ideas of like, let's write cards about this, or and we started to branch out. So Mitch got cards, and Teddy got cards, and Lindsay got cards, and and we would send notes of gratitude as well. So sometimes we would see something who'd done something amazing, or a small business that was being targeted by, Trump supporters, and we'd send them cards of support or cards of gratitude, or, whatever it took to sort of keep people going. And the funniest thing was that I started to get gifts in the mail. So I got a beautiful handmade robe that someone sent me. I got stacks of cards to contribute to my efforts. People would send me books of stamps and, postage. Oh, we know this is costing you a lot of money, and we want to help you out. And I kept saying to people, don't send it to me. Send it to Texas Civil Rights Project. Send it to Raisa. Send it to all the people in the country who are doing this hard work. Send it to BLM. And people started to do that, and they started to share what they were doing in their own communities. So then the election happened, which we all worked really hard on. And the question was, what do we do now? And we've built this community, how do we keep it going? And so we pooled the group and changed the name. It used to be Letters to Donald, and we've now changed it to Postcards for Progress. And we all continue to collaborate and write. I don't necessarily write every single day in the way that I did, because, 4 years of cards every single day, sometimes the creativity wasn't there, or sometimes I didn't know what I should write. And so I've given myself a little bit of a break, a few days here and there. But just because we have a new administration doesn't mean that, obviously, you all know this, that the issues aren't still there, and that we don't need to keep fighting and keep pushing. And so my commitment was that we would translate this community into this new world. And so we keep going, we keep writing. We're going to keep working on campaigns, and it's also become, a lot of these people have become friends, where we're planning, how do we have a COVID meetup or post-COVID meetup? How do we, gather? How do we, if we go to marches in DC, do we go as a group? Do we meet up, and that's been the most rewarding thing. And I think it's really what's helped me get through the past 4 years. I mean, with a lot of family support and all of the other things. But, I think for me, why I do what I do with that is that it felt like, I could be one person who wrote a card and it started something. And I'll put the link to the group in the chat, just in case anybody's interested. And I'm gonna keep wielding my Sharpies. So thank you again for having me. And thanks, Mom. Good job.
Oh, thank you, sweetheart.
Put a great day together.
Thank you. I love you.
I love you too.
And our next speaker, I know has a time commitment, but our next speaker is Shalimar Adorno. And I started to talk to Shalimar about something totally different. And then, because we had such a great conversation, we got to her background here in the Bronx and her connection to Hostos, which was really exciting. And it had some great little moments of Barbie and Hostos. So Shalimar, thank you so much. I know how busy you are, so thank you for doing this.
No, thank you for having me, and good morning to everyone. It's a privilege to sit here and listen to all the different stories and just know that when we share these stories, we realize just how much more we have in common than what we are different. So I appreciate that. So my name is Shalimar Adorno, and about 6 years ago, I went to work with the president of the World Bank Group, Dr. Jim Young Kim. And unbeknownst to me at the time, he had dedicated the bulk of his life as an infectious disease doctor to help the poor and to fight pandemics. And so as such, he established twin goals for the bank of ending extreme poverty by 2030 and boosting shared prosperity. And, in my role, my job was to ensure to run the day-to-day operations of the president's office, supervise the president's security detail. But I also had the privilege of traveling to these countries to really get a sense of what were the issues and find ways or seek ways in which we could find solutions to these issues. And so whether it was educating parents on why their child was stunted, or making sure that certain communities in places like India, where women in particular did not have toilets in their home, which meant that if they wanted to relieve themselves at 2 a.m., they'd have to go outside where they could potentially be attacked or raped or beaten by people who were lurking in the areas. But also places like Bangladesh, where they had like brownouts, which meant that while someone might have light for 2 hours, they would then take the light away from that part of the town to move it onto another section of the country. And so always sort of trying to figure out ways to give people hope, right? And opportunities to flourish and come out of the extreme poverty that they were in, which at the time, it was anyone who lived on $1.90 or less a day. So, this experience would go on to change my life forever, just recognizing that, we are not on this earth to see how important, we can become, but more so to see what a difference we can actually make in the lives of others. And so that really gave me a sense of purpose. And so 2 years ago, the president decided that he would step down and join a private equity firm, which is where we are today, Global Infrastructure Partners. And he asked me to come on as an assistant VP, where I serve as a senior advisor, where we would continue to do the work of helping the poor, these third world countries that we've decided to invest infrastructure in and really sort of implement tolls and roads, and in bridges, just to make sure that they have an opportunity to leave wherever they are and bring these goods over to big cities where they're able to actually make a life for themselves. And so when I think about why I do the work that I do, for me, it's twofold. I think that when you come across something in your life that you think has transformed you and was extremely valuable, I feel that you have a responsibility to pass that on. But also, I'm a Puerto Rican girl from the Bronx that was, born in Lincoln Hospital to a mom who was 17 at the time, and who went out of her way to ensure that she could sell her food stamps to ensure that I got the opportunities, I was afforded the opportunities to go to private school, something that she just didn't have. And I saw myself as a surrogate for our constituents. And in that vein, I understand what it is to feel displaced. I know what it is to be hungry. I understand what it is not to have a place to live, not to have clothes to wear. And so for anyone that's had that experience, it's something that stays with you forever. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Shalimar, thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here and telling us your story. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been great to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. You guys have a wonderful day. I'm so sorry that I have to jump off.
Yeah, but thanks.
All right, bye-bye.
And our next speaker is somebody who's been in the Bronx for a long time doing great work. Rosalba Rowland, who is the I'd say executive director, but there's probably another title of Pregones. And actually Pregones and the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater came together a while ago. And I told Rosalba that the first time I ever saw a Shakespearean play was in the Bronx in a schoolyard. And the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater was the organization putting it on. So now she's brought dance and theater and wonderful things together. So Rosalba, thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Eileen. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you all. What a privilege. What an amazing shot of energy for a Friday. I think it's a perfect way to end the week. And I'll try to be as concise as possible, but I'm Rosalba Rolón, and I'm artistic director and co-founder of Pregones Theater, which is located just a block away from Hostos on Walton Avenue. I co-founded the company as an ensemble theater. I moved from Puerto Rico to New York in 1973, and I've lived in the Bronx since 1992. I came in with, like everyone else, with the big dreams. You know, I had just finished my university. I was in an exchange program and began to work on the Latino theater companies at the time. One of them, of course, we all knew that at the time that the three big ones were Puerto Rican Traveling Theater, founded by the amazing Miriam Colon, the trailblazer that she was, and Spanish Repertory Theater and and we were just trying to work and look for ways to work in theater with our mainly Spanish language. And soon after, I had the opportunity to begin to audition and do all kinds of things. And of course, there was always at the time in the 70s, very, very big challenges especially for women of color, which were the auditions were dangerous at times, you know, because we were seen as these oversexed women. And so part of the audition process was trying to take advantage of us. During the process, we had to put together organizations and look for help and look for someone to help us challenge the system. At that time, of course, the accent was a problem, you know, couldn't imagine one person with an accent doing anything important until Raul Julia came on board. And he said, if I ever change my accent, I will be betraying my mother's womb. And that sort of changed the course for a lot of actors with accents. Of course, if it's a Spanish accent, if it's a British accent, there's no problem. So, so that sort of got me to be able to, meet my amazing colleagues and friends, and together we began to think about putting together a company. So long story short, we created Pregones Theater. Pregones is a Spanish word for the cry of the street vendors. And we say, we don't want to have a theater on our heads. That's too much trouble. We don't want to have anything. We just want to tour. We just want to take our work everywhere, original work, musical theater work. It was at the moment where the political movements in South America were infusing our work with the popular theater movement. And on we went. We began to just go to every church, every street corner, every senior citizen home we could to do our work, inspired in part for the work that Miriam was doing at the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater at a much larger scale. And that was the time when we met Evelina Antonetti, the amazing Bronx leader, who took us by the hand, led us by the hand, and she said, you're onto something. And we began to work a lot, you know, in our Bronx neighborhoods, but we were touring all the time. So in summary, to date, we have visited more than 500, we have performed or done residencies more than 500 cities across the United States, 37 states and 18 countries. In fact, right after this, I need to jump off to go to Holland, to the Netherlands for a meeting, a Zoom meeting with my partners in Rotterdam. And so it is what it did is it gave us a perspective of the country, or two things, gave us a perspective of the country and the many, many communities that were going through similar situations as ours, of how the arts were at the central, was needed to build communities around the country. We were not going to main stages around the country. We're going to the tiny stages, to the parks, to everywhere they could have us. And And then we realized that one of our speakers said that her mom said, no ballet dancer for you, right? And I understand it. We have been challenging parents throughout 40 years as we built our theater in the Bronx, as we created our beautiful theater here, to tell parents, how can we work together to make careers viable for artists? Why do we have to be scared? Why are we celebrating when they say, I want to be a doctor or a lawyer? And we run scared because they say, I want to be an artist. You know, why can't we plug in our resources also together to make those dreams possible? And that has been part of the mission of the work that we do. And so after we toured, and we've been touring forever, and our international work also has put us in contact with some wrong notions. And the reason we work a lot with Rotterdam and Slovakia and all these places is because their immigrant communities are very, very big. But imagine us being in a mountain in Slovakia with shepherds doing some poetry. And when we said Bronx, they went like, ah, the reaction was like in a far away mountain in Banska Bystrica in Slovakia, the shepherds were reacting to the Bronx. Why? So 4 years ago, and so we began to think Bronx as a destination for the arts, Bronx as a destination for our young people in the borough, Bronx as a way in which we can work with elders who have been wanting to stand up in the center of the stage and tell a story with lights, with costumes, with a story to tell. That is what we're there to do, in addition to making sure that is good, no bad art, that is good, that is strong, that's what we need to do. And so just like any community needs good lawyers and teachers and doctors and all that, we need good artists. And that's what, you know, and it does, some will go on a professional route, perfect, I love it. And some will use the art to enrich their lives and the work that they do in the community. And that's also very important. 4 years ago, I've been working with Miriam for many years as she aged, and she saw that she needed to transition. We merged our two theaters. So from not wanting to have any theater and just travel the world, we now have two, our Bronx theater. And then the other, the Puerto Rican Traveling Theater, which is right in the middle of the Broadway district. So we have these two very different worlds. And so I love it because our offices are in the Bronx. We're Bronx, and it's like the margin managing the mainstream, right? And it's interesting that our very, very excited friends and wonderful companies around the world, every time we tell them, okay, so we're bringing you, we're going to present you this year, they said, but we're going to the Bronx, right? Because that in their minds that's what they're going to learn the most from. And some others said, like, been to Broadway, been there, done that. So it is all about creating institutions that will be able to make careers viable. And when I say artists, believe me, sometimes we don't have an idea of how many careers can be built in the arts industry if we look at it as an industry. So that, there are designers, set designers, lighting designers, sound designers, costume designers. There are now, of course, digital media designers that now for the past 20 years or so. There are carpenters in museums. There are art handlers. There are people who are specialized in very minute things that when a show is on, you have no idea that even if you're looking at a one person performance, there are 12 people behind that one person to make sure that that is working well. Front of house, ticketing, every single service for our community needs to be in place. So we hope that you can all visit us in the summer. We continue our tours, and in the summer what we do is we go to Bronx Gardens and we honor the community gardens around the borough. So we have our stage garden Roomba, and we go to 8 community gardens where we spend Saturday afternoons with a combination of performances and activists who come in to talk about the history of that particular community, and in the effort to continue to bring attention to these gardens and the importance of a community centers in each one of our communities in the Bronx. So please do visit us. It is interesting. I am, it is because of our travels, because of our profile, we're plugged into the mainstream of the industry, and it's amazing how we live in these two worlds. And I can tell you that I'll leave it at that like many of you, I know what it means to be a 1%. Remember the 1% thing? I know what it is to be 1% because I'm usually the only one in the room that looks like me. Not because I have 1% of the wealth. And so in many occasions, we are the only ones in the room who look like us or who feel like us or who work like us. That to say that we too as Latinx theater have the responsibility to diversify, to open our doors to all cultures, all races. We celebrating this year our 27th anniversary with our partnership with an Appalachian company from Whitesburg, Kentucky, rural white company, amazing family. By now, after 27 years, we've been visiting each other and working in each other's towns for 27 years, as well as with companies in South Africa and South Asia and South America and Europe. So it is all about trying to see that we have one globe to share amongst all of us. It's just one for all of us. Thank you so much. I'll stay for a little while. I need to jump off in about 5-10 minutes because as I said, I need to fly to Holland via Zoom. Thank you.
You're on mute, Ali.
Oh, yeah, I know. Thank you, Rosalba. It's always great to see you. And this is kind of the art section. So, so we're going to shift to Shala Lynch, a filmmaker who is actually also a recent Bronx resident. So, Shala?
Hi. Okay. I didn't realize I was going to be up next.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. No worries. So I am Shala Lynch. Thank you, Eileen. It's a pleasure to be here. It's been a very inspiring morning so far. My name, so it's spelled Shola, but it's pronounced Shala, and it's a Nigerian name. And this is why. I am not Nigerian, but my parents felt like it was important to name both their kids with names that had meaning. And it means one who brings honor and riches. And that leads me to kind of who I become, because it was something that was told to me over and over and over again. It's the value of hearing a story, hearing your story, and then having the imagination to kind of bring it to fruition. So I become a filmmaker, and a documentary filmmaker, and I am also the curator of the Moving Image and Recorded Sound Division at the Schomburg Center. As a filmmaker, I center women's stories, and I center particularly stories about women of color. I am best known for, and this was before we even believed a Black president was possible, let alone a woman of color to be in the White House. And in 2000, I tell a story about Shirley Chisholm and her run for president in 1972. And so it helped recast her in our history and culture, that moment was something that we had overlooked, we had pushed aside. We only acknowledged her as the first Black woman elected to Congress. And our culture did not recognize the foresight and also the brilliance and strategy she had in terms of her running for president. So I've also made a film about Angela Davis as an activist, and she was somebody I chose to focus on, in part because we remember her as completely guilty, when in fact she was acquitted by an all-white jury related to her politics in the 70s. So in telling stories, we need the evidence of who we are to tell these kinds of stories in documentary film. And this leads me to the work that I do at the Schomburg Center. I run the film archive, the film and audio archive. And I was so drawn to that work. And actually that work was what brought me to filmmaking. But I just want to tell a quick story about Arturo Schomburg. Afro-Puerto Rican, grows up 19th century in Puerto Rico. And he asks his school teacher about Black history. His school teacher tells him it doesn't exist, that Black people have contributed nothing worth noting to the world. Nothing. And
Trying to pay
imagine
attention.
as a young
What?
person hearing that.
Yeah.
What do you have to say? You have
I'm
nothing to
muted in my
say.
camera.
But what happens is he comes to New York, he immigrates to New York. This is before the Harlem Renaissance. He has his first job as a mail clerk. He's feeling fine, I'm sure, a little money in his pocket. And he starts acquiring, buying manuscripts, books, photographs, all the evidence of Black history and culture. And by 1925, that's 10,000 items. The public library buys it. 1926, and he writes in an essay, and this is the core of why I do what I do, right? And I'm going to borrow from Arturo Schomburg. He writes in an essay called "The Negro Digs Up His Past," and you can Google it. That's the name of the essay, and he names his 10,000 items vindicating evidences, not evidence, evidences. And in my imagination, my historical imagination, I read that as him being in conversation with his school teacher. I can't argue with you over the validity of Black history. I'm just going to collect the evidences. And so that is the work as a culture worker and as a storyteller that I do. It's about collecting the evidences, but it's also about narrating the story that animates our lives. And it's the story about us in the present, and it's the story so we can see each other. So thank you, Eileen, for bringing us all together. But it is critical to turn the lens to the past and reclaim all the people, the foundation, the legacy that's been set for us, that we're never alone in our struggles, that there are all of these women, people who have come before us, and we need to reclaim them so that they're ours, so we can stand a little taller and we can see each other a little more clearly, and that we can set our sights on the future that we deserve. So thank you, Eileen.
Shala, thank you. That was inspiring, and I loved hearing that about your name. And I thought it's so funny because bringing riches, clearly a documentary filmmaker is all about physical riches. So
cultural riches,
Yeah,
riches. Right. And we have to acknowledge that the arts are important, right?
Exactly,
We do have to
exactly.
that, so.
Which is the perfect segue into our next speaker, who I juxtaposed the order, but it kind of works. And that is Viviana Bianchi, who is the executive director of Bronx Council on the Arts, and who is a strong supporter, obviously, of the arts. So, Viviana.
Thank you, Eileen. So, Viviana Bianchi, ED, Bronx Council on the Arts, and I'm really honored to be surrounded by so many amazing women today. Thank you, Eileen, for the invitation, the privilege. And I know Eileen for more than 20 years, right? It's even longer than 20 years. And I want to send kudos to you, Eileen, because your resilience and your strength are admirable. So having said that, tell you a little bit about what I do. The Bronx Council on the Arts, or BCA, is an organization dedicated to supporting artists and arts organizations in the Bronx. And we provide resources, we build connections, we do cultural advocacy, and we focus on women and on people of color, members of the LGBTQ, and I'm not very good with acronyms, as you can see, LGBTQ communities, and all of those that have been left aside, whether it is by funders or opportunities, basically. And I grew up in a family of artists, and seeing the challenges that artists face, being one myself as an actress and a filmmaker, the lack of opportunities. And I'm at a point in my life, it was a dream, it was a goal to get to a point in my life where I could support their struggles and through the work. So hence the opportunity to serve at BCA is the conclusion of a long, long winding road. And every day I'm grateful and I'm inspired by the mission of the organization and the fight to promote cultural equity. And that implies whether it's securing adequate funding or recognition for the artists, or even sometimes fighting injustice in gentrification that is now coming to the Bronx, and how is that going to affect culture in the borough? So in my personal life, I'm an immigrant from Argentina. At the time of that severe political upheaval in the country, it was 1978. And as a young 19-year-old, it wasn't easy to make it here, like it happens to many immigrants, especially being women. I remember going looking for apartment. I had separated from my husband, the kid, to look for apartment separately, and a landlord was like, "Oh, that's fabulous. You are a single parent, a single father." And when I went, he was like, "Well, who's going to watch your kid?" So I realized that as a woman, I had to fight twice as much. I'm trying to remember now, pick up on the thread. Also, my grandma was an immigrant to Argentina. She came when she was 14 with her brother, and she was really the role model that kind of inspired me throughout this winding road that I've been down to. And the principles that have guided me and continue to guide my life, and that I believe that made some of the achievements possible, is perseverance, being honest, defending my beliefs, and always showing up. So basically, I'm a fighter, and that's, I think, how I was able to raise two kids. They're grown up now by myself. I finished a graduate degree when I didn't know any English when I got here, and then, being in the space where I am today. And in a year that is being so challenging for the arts and for everyone, of course, that's how I think I was able to lead BCA and its amazing staff, which is made mostly of women, to make it, stronger, so that we can continue to be present for those we served. I guess all my life I work in the nonprofit sector as a decision, and I guess a vocation for service guides me as well. And as you all know, unfortunately, artists and cultural organizations in the Bronx have traditionally been forgotten, despite the cultural richness in the borough and all the legacy. So knowing that I lead this organization and that I'm able to help in our humble way is a source of inspiration that helps me deal with the difficulties and the challenges of every day. So even today, it was very difficult to be here. And I was like, no, I'm not giving up. I'm resilient. I'm going to be there. So the camera wasn't working. The mic wasn't working. I had to move my car. I don't know. I had to do so many things this morning, and it's like, I'm going to be there. So I believe the arts can help change the world. It's going to be very necessary for post-COVID and during COVID, for trauma to channel the many losses that we have suffered. And so thanks all of you for all the things you do, and thank you for allowing me to be here.
Viviana, thank you so much. And as a BCA board member, I can attest to the fighting spirit that Viviana has brought to that job, and congratulations on all that work. Our next speaker is Francesca Felice, and full disclosure, Francesca is the producer of my show on BronxNet. So that's why I asked her to come and say a little bit about her plans and what she's doing. Thanks, Francesca.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Eileen. Happy Friday. So it's funny that Viviana was talking about her resilience and being here today, because my Wi-Fi decided to be down today. So I hope everyone can hear and see me well, because I'm on a hotspot. So everybody has been lagging. But so my name is Francesca Felice. Again, thank you for having me in this program, Eileen. I'm happy to have heard everyone's stories, and I'm excited to share a little bit about mine. So I'm a video journalist and I'm a TV producer. I started my career at New York One at 21 years old. I used to work at 5 a.m., wake up at 3 a.m., work until 3 p.m. or 5 p.m. There was really no end to that job. In the cold, in the heat, in the snow, the rain, any weather condition, I was chasing the news all over New York City. So I'm grateful now to be in a different position at BronxNet. I'm a producer, a videographer, an editor. I do it all at BronxNet. So I produce one of our flagship shows, Open Tuesday, and I also produce, as Eileen said, Mission BX. So before the pandemic, we used to do the show in the field. We would visit nonprofits in the Bronx and we would highlight the work that they do. So I'm thankful that we're still able to do this virtually, Eileen. With Open, we quickly transitioned to producing whole new shows from home. Like I really did not know that this was even possible, but I'm excited and I'm happy that we were able to do this because everything that was going on with COVID in the beginning was super confusing and there was so much information going around. And I feel like people didn't really know like what the facts were, what the truth is. And so I was happy to be one of those people that was able to give that information out and, you know, accurate information about COVID-19 and real-time updates. So it was definitely a huge change and it was very demanding. But I feel like we all came together as a team and we've been producing honestly more content than ever during COVID-19, during the pandemic. So it's been very fulfilling for sure to be a journalist during these trying times. And outside of BronxNet, I also have my own business and blog. I'm the founder and creative director of Uptown Girl Productions. So and here's my logo right here. And it's a vlog about all things Washington Heights, where I was born and raised. So I create short form and I'm working on longer form content and I spotlight local community members and organizations making a difference in my community. I tell the stories of the people in my community. I give a voice to people who deserve to be heard. So why am I doing this work? So I started it as a form of activism. I was very frustrated with the way that the neighborhood was changing due to gentrification, which I'm sure many people can relate to with their neighborhoods. Mom and pop shops closing down, long-term residents being displaced, new folks moving in and calling the cops on my neighbors. So I was full of emotion and storytelling through video journalism is my way of being involved and keeping the community up to date and getting messages out there about the community. And most importantly, giving Latinx, Afro Latinx, and Black folks real and positive representation, unlike so much of what we see on the news. And that's outside of BronxNet, because I don't know if you guys are familiar with BronxNet, but we're community news. So everything that we put out there is positive. So it's not something you'll see on like New York 1 or News 12, where it's like, oh, someone got shot or someone, you know, things like that. So it's fulfilling work to be providing resources and information to my community, both in my full-time job with BronxNet and through Uptown Girl Productions in Washington Heights. So again, thank you, Eileen, for having me. And I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you, Francesca, for everything, especially being like the best producer.
Thank you.
Awesome. I can't say enough about
I
how
appreciate it.
it's, you know, producer you can depend on, all good things. So
Thank you. And I love working with you.
oh, thank you. It was a,
And I'm so happy to have met your daughter through this Zoom. I was like, oh.
I know, she's awesome. So our next speaker is Tasha Doge. Tasha is an artist and an activist. And Tasha, I'm going to hand it over to you. You're muted.
Good morning, everyone. I am so happy to be here. Thank you for me being here. How Ali and I met speaks to my story. So I'll just jump right in. My name is Tasha Doge. I am a Haitian-infused, Bronx-bred visual and performance artist. I'm a self-proclaimed loudmouth, cultural vigilante, and a disruptor by nature. That kind of summarizes me in a nutshell. For those who may have low vision, I am a brown skinned melanated girl. I have a nose ring, a lip ring, all the rings. I have blonde braided hair and a huge bun, and I'm wearing my resilience hoops. Okay, boom, boom, my resilience, and my lip gloss is popping. So who I am, what do I do, why do I do it? So like Eileen said, I am an artist, and in listening to other people's stories, what I heard, what was central is community. At the time, I was working at a Harlem-based nonprofit, frustrated by the bureaucracy, overwhelmed by deliverables, and really feeling like I can see the onset of behavioral change, but not having the ability to do the shift, right? So what came up for me was like art. Art felt very avant-garde. It felt very like I had no rules. I can do whatever I wanted. I am not formally trained, but I am leaning into my innate abilities, my God-given gifts, right? So as someone was talking about like the things, I believe it was, I don't know, honor people's names. Hold on. It was Rosalba who was talking about how one particular professions are uplifted. So, you know, speaking to the fact that I love medicine, bio and math were my strong suits at Cardinal Spellman High School. So shout out to the Falcons. But what happened is the trajectory changed, right? It was like I wanted to be a doctor, and then I learned about malpractice insurance. I was like, hell no. Then I was like, I want to be a nurse, and I was specifically wanted to be a forensic nurse because criminology and wanting to help people who were impacted by violence was at the forefront of what I wanted. And then, like I said, ended up in a nonprofit organization, and it was like, ta-da, artist. You know, the epiphany came to me very strongly, and it was about truly finding my passion and my purpose, and still being able to meld my love for medicine and wellness and wholeness all into my practice. So in saying that, like I said, I'm a disruptor by nature. That speaks to my advocacy and my activism work, and using art to be a conduit for those conversations, like Francesca just mentioned, for the voices that deserve to be heard. And Charlotte was talking about, oh my God, you just gave me all the, I knew about Ataro's, you know, I'm tongue-tied. I'm so excited. I knew about Atara Schomburg's story about the teacher, but I didn't know about the essay that was written. So again, leaning to the path and being to excavate those true stories and talking about Unbought and Unbossed. I actually did a show based on that. So that's awesome. So what's coming up for me and why I do the work that I do is to also elevate how we are connected. As women, we are doing the work. We are the ones that have been pushing revolutions, even in our civil rights movements, our social justice movements. Our contributions are overlooked. Like I said, I'm of Haitian descent, but it was a woman that, you know, conducted and galvanized people to have the ritual of Wakaima. You know what I mean? So there were women that were also fighting for revolution that get overlooked. So in knowing that that is our contribution, it has been our legacy of contribution, I want to uplift that legacy, and that's what I do with my work. So I am a risk taker, and I live a praxis of abundance. That means not just wanting things to be abundant, but it is a praxis, an active practice of abundance. I will surmise all of this around a book that I had read recently titled Rise Up, A Call for African American Women into Leadership by Sylvia Rose. And people who know me will tell you I'm definitely led by spirit in my work. And I just got kicked in the butt a couple of times to pick up a book on 14th Street, and this one happened to be one of them. And one of the things that came up that was said is that Sylvia talked about life being a puzzle, and we all have a purpose. And what happens if we don't step into our purpose, someone else does, but that puzzle piece doesn't fit exactly because they don't have it or have the tools in the way that we would have it. And when I read that, it was an additional jolt that fired me up to say that I need to insert myself into this puzzle. I need to make sure that I am taking up this space that I have been destined to take, and I will continue to do that. And so I want to leave that with everybody. Find your purpose, insert yourself into the piece of that puzzle, because that is what will help us in the end. And I'm happy to be here. Thank y'all.
Asha, thank you. Thank you so much. So we're going to hear next from, and she'll be our last table talk speaker because and I'm afraid we're not going to have time for the networking, but because we're very happy to be able to be speaking after this with Amanda Septimo, who is a state assembly person who has a great story of resilience. But Zoe Flowers, some of you may know because she's done workshops for us on institutionalized racism and the trauma of institutionalized racism, but she's got a really fascinating background doing a lot of really, really interesting things. So Zoe, and she's going to also, I think, Hope, take us out with a poem.
I am.
So, great. Thank you,
I
Zoe.
am. So thank you all. I mean, this has been just such an amazing time in this room with y'all, hearing everything that you do. And I hope that there is an email, something that gets circulated so that we can keep in touch with each other. So like Eileen said, I'm Zoe Flowers and I am a healing artist. And so all of my work really goes into how do we learn to love ourselves within the context of racism, sexism, patriarchy, and just all of the things. And I came to this work really as a survivor of domestic violence, but I've always written. I've always, I used to write like little short stories when I was working retail, and I would pass my little stories around to my coworkers. And then I started getting into poetry. And then, like Tasha talked about, having your plans interrupted. And one of the things that interrupted my path, or took me on a circular way to my path, I guess, was experiencing dating violence in my early 20s. And so I was managing a singing group. I thought I was going to move to New York City and act and do all these things. And then found myself in a dating violence relationship. And then the next thing you know, I was relocating to Atlanta, Georgia, changing my name and just doing all of these things. But life is funny because now, everything just comes full circle. And now I get to do all the things that I wanted to do when I was 7 years old. And so that is why all of my work really has to do with how do we heal? That is, one of my playwriting teachers at Gotham said that writing is, we're always trying to scratch the itch, the thing that we can't, that the question, the unanswerable question that like plagues us. And so for me, that unanswerable question is, how do we heal from all of this? And so for me, one of the ways that I heal obviously is writing, but I also do Reiki. I'm a Reiki master. I teach meditation classes. I do retreats overseas and here in the country. And I've been working in the domestic violence movement for 20 years. So about 10 years ago, I decided that domestic violence, it was too much. I'm an artist. I moved to New York, wrote a play, and had the honor, luck, blessings to be able to take that play to different places around the country. And that play is called Ashes. And it was based off of the book I wrote called From Ashes to Angels, Dust, a Journey Through Womanhood, where I actually interviewed survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault and put their story, and they are women of color, mainly Black. There were a few Latinx women in there, but they're mainly African-American women. And I chronicled their stories and also put in healing information in there as well. So the first poem I'm going to read is from that. And it's called In the Blood. Soon and very soon, I will disremember how you gutted, sucker punched, split me in two, cracked me wide, fed on all that lived, leaving only carcass in its place. Shell-shocked, bones picked dry, I rise. But like walkers, I'm not fully awake. Ritual slow, I begin exercising you from cell memory, hypnotize myself to unlove you, cleanse root, sacral, crown, you've helped me become strategic, employing ancient recipes, visiting the mat, I sit at the Baba's feet. Orisha say, you're not the one, move on, it ain't that deep. I'm a shown sheddy cords that keep us linked, carry black onyx between legs, burying it in the ground when my cycle is complete. When loneliness threatens to overtake me, I pull out the receipts, all the while reminding myself to breathe. Ancient message, my DNA birth civilization. I am the one I seek. I great-grandmother my inner child, become Obia lady, put your name in the freezer, stay on Duppy alert, sprinkle black salt cross my doorway, burn yellow, blue, and white candles, bathe in oranges and rue, bless my head with myrrh at sunset. I am forgetting about you. Offering cowries and honey to the river, pineapples to the ocean, myself to any enlightened ancestor that will listen. I ask Oshun if this is payback for those I killed. She tells me, look for sweetness. Bless all that curse me. She is not the source of guilt. Fully awake or re-clear, the roots begin to loosen, and you are becoming no thing more than practice in urban legend. The more I pray, the more your relevance is lessened. You have become 8-track because it is I that is honey to the bee, and soon you will be haint restless, searching for spells to unloose you from me. And the last poem I will read is called Red, White, and Blue. Red, white, and blue, black and bruised, again and again, silenced, shut down, pulled down, we bounce. Red, white, blue, black and bruised, silenced, shut down, pushed down, pulled under, we bounce. Back, are buoyant. Red, white, blue, black and bruised, we bounce back, buoyant, float up from the silence, this time, always, carrying songs and medicine and poetry. Red, white, blue, black and bruised, we rise and gather, become medicine and music and poetry. We emerge, carrying the whole world on our backs, this time, always.
Zoe, thank you so much.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you very much for being here. And thank you to all of our pop-up speakers. And now we're going to switch gears and we're going to have a little conversation with Assemblywoman Amanda Septimo. Amanda was at our first resilience conference. And what I remember is Amanda talking about, you know, women should run for office and that should all happen, but what happens if you lose? And so I never forgot her that because I thought that was so relevant. And now I'm proud to say that Amanda is the newly elected state assemblywoman for the 84th district in the Bronx, having just recently won an election. And Amanda, thank you so much for being here. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that you won and that you're here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be back with you all.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So what made you decide that you were going back in, that you're going to try this again?
You know, at least some slice of insanity. But, you know, I think, so I won't lie to you, losing the first time in 2018. So for those who don't know, I ran, my name's Amanda Septimo, I represent the 84th Assembly District, but I ran for the seat originally in 2018 against someone who'd been in office for almost as long as I was alive at that point. And it was an uphill battle and I came short. And it was an absolutely devastating experience because I think when you're in this sort of daily grind of a campaign, you start to drink your own juice and you think you're almost there. And we came up short and it was absolutely devastating. And truthfully, it took me a few months of like intense reflecting and therapy to even feel normal. And then I got there to whatever normal means, right? Because I do think, and that's a separate conversation, but I do think it's a process that changes you. And I really sort of reflected on what work I could be doing that would make me feel fulfilled. If I didn't run again, what else would I do? That I would wake up every day and feel motivated and feel like I was making the contributions and making change in the way that I was meant to do it. And the truth is I always came up short on an answer. And, you know, I think there's a lot that goes into the fact that, you know, running again and losing again has a lot of sort of impact on your political capital and your prospective elections and what have you. And so it was a really, really pressured decision for me. And it wasn't one that I came to easily, but I think the reality is that I felt like deeply connected to the purpose of it all. And that just was something that I couldn't walk away from.
So how did you change your campaign radically? What did you do to get yourself into the space of doing it again?
You know, the most work, and every campaign has learned lessons. I think win or lose, you come out with experiences that are like, okay, I could have done that better. We will do that better next time. I think the most work that I had to do was on myself. I think there is so much that goes in. Being a candidate can be really isolating in that you have to balance kind of being this like fearless leader. Like, yes, we're going to win, we're going to do it. But in reality, like, you're not sure, right? You just know you're giving your all, you know, you're putting everything on the line, but you're not actually sure how it's going to work out. But no one is inspired by a leader who says, you know what, guys, we're going to try our hardest, but it might not work, right? And so you've got to sort of give it this persona. And I wasn't sure that I could, having been through the experience of loss and what it felt like, that I could even sort of pretend to be there anymore. And so we went into the campaign. I mean, I'd gotten just under 40% the first time. So it wasn't that we were so far off, right? And so we took our lessons learned and kind of, you know, tinkered with our campaign plan. But in the end, I was actually able to remove my opponent from the ballot for fraud. And that was like destabilizing, honestly, for like my world, for the race, and in a great way, in that we were able to win the primary and then move on to November. But it was, nothing about this process feels expected. I've got to tell you, I'm still adjusting to it all.
Well, and I have to say, Amanda, this morning I was listening to the news and I thought, oh my God, now Amanda is in Albany. So there's that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, so let's take the headlines out of this question. But what's it like to be in Albany without the headlines, with just in terms of the work you're doing? And
sure. Well, you know, I want to say thank you to Tasha and Patricia. I'm glad that you can relate and have the chat up at the same time. You know, it's month 3. We're like in the middle of my 3rd month, so like 2.5 months in. And I want to tell you, everyone tells us new folks that we're the biggest class of new elected since 1974. There haven't been this many new legislators since then. So I think it speaks to the idea that like people are really demanding a different kind of leadership in this moment. And everyone says that nothing about what is happening right now is usual. I think in everything from like Zooms to the fact that no public members are allowed into Capitol. So there are a ton of legislators that I haven't even met in person yet, or my colleagues who I know really well over Zoom, but we've never met in person. And then, you know, we can ignore the headlines, but they're an important part of it, right? I think we're really at this kind of reckoning moment as a party in terms of values, in terms of leadership. And we were already there, right, with the pandemic. The pandemic, I think, exposed so many things that were wrong with so many of our communities and so much of our policy making and how it happens, that we were already at this moment of where we get to decide, like, what is our future? What is the state we want to live in? What is the kind of city we want to live in? And we get to, this is probably the closest to a blank slate we'll ever get, right? And now we have to be deliberate in that rebuild. And so destabilizing, again, is the word that comes to mind. It feels like everything is in a tailspin, and it's really it's a challenge to sort of keep it all straight, but a worthwhile one. We're in the middle of budget season, which literally means like we're working 13, 14-hour days. I never thought I had to buy a new laptop because I was like, okay, if I'm going to be using it this much, then we've got to make sure it's good. I never thought I'd be spending this much time in front of a screen. But it's an exciting time. I do think we have a unique opportunity in everything from leadership to policy, and to really remake and reimagine the state and the city that we live in. And I'm excited to be a part of it.
And I can just say that I also just bought a new laptop because I could never get through this conference with the one I had. So I understand that. But you're also a real community activist. So you've been doing some incredible work in the community. Can you just sort of give us an overview of that work?
Sure. 3-second version. I sort of began, and I tell people that this is really where I like built my lens of how I view the world. I started in this kind of world of organizing and community justice work with this organization called the Point CDC, which has a teen activist program. And it was an incredible experience to learn from some of the most talented organizers in the Bronx, who really understand the intersection of policy and everyday life, and were really incredible teachers for me. And in those years, I think is when I really developed what I call an equity lens. And this is an equity lens that I think you can apply to really anything, right? You can be talking sanitation, schools, anything that you can name, there is an equity angle to be seen. And that's probably not being met truthfully. And so I'm really grateful for my time at the Point, because what I tell people that it established me as an activist and allowed me to sort of develop the experiences that allow me to be an activist in government, right? And for me, being an activist in government means, again, bringing that equity lens to every policy, to every process. And so I did work with the Point. I interned with Congressman Serrano. I went away to college down in Nashville. I came back, there was an opening at Congressman Serrano's office, and I took it. I joined the team as a community liaison, was then promoted to district director a short time later, and the rest is history. I've worked for some unions in between, and it's just been a wild ride.
So I have one last question for you. One is, what are your goals? And we're going to combine it with what do you see as the greatest challenges that you're facing?
Yeah, that's a good
Easy,
question.
huh?
Yeah. I think the goals, so much has changed. And I'm sorry that I like the message today is like destabilization, but so much has changed. If you asked me anything this time last year, or not this time, maybe a year and a half ago, completely different answers, right? But we just live in a completely different world now. And so for me, I would have said at one point that my goal is to make sure that I'm leading change as much as possible through a long career in politics, making sure that policies at every level are reflecting what we need on the ground. But now that I'm here, and especially in these last couple of months, I have found myself having to decide, like, what am I going to go off the cliff for, right? I had always thought that, like, at some point, there might be an issue that like ends my career, right? So an example of this, marriage equality in New York. When marriage equality in New York was passing, we needed 4 Republicans in the New York State legislature to vote with the Democrats to get it done. 4, just 4. Got the 4, got marriage equality passed. Every single one of those Republicans lost their next election. Every single one. And I don't know if they would have done it if they knew they were going to lose, right? But they had to have a sense, and they made the decision anyway. And so when I say go off the cliff, that's what I think about, right? Like, what is the work that is important enough where you know that driving as hard as you can means that maybe you don't come back, but that work still gets done. And so in these couple of months, I've had that question a lot, because when I think about equity, when I think about how we rebuild, and now in this moment with everything that's happening with our governor, when I think about our values, the values of our party, the leadership that we're promoting in New York, and the leadership that we need to meet this moment, I find myself wanting to meet the moment, and meaning like that means taking big risks. And so my goal is to make as much change as I can in the ways that make the most sense. And I'm really just kind of letting life guide me. And I think that the challenge is just always drawing on the bravery that requires. I constantly have to talk myself into like pep talks, because it's hard to live in this world where you feel like you're always putting it all on the line. And I think, but that, this is a resilience conference. I think that's part of resiliency as well, right? Like developing the muscle to center yourself enough to do the things that make you feel good about continuing in whatever work or whatever pursuit. And so I think that that's one challenge. And then I'd say the other challenge is just, being a young woman of color in politics, truthfully. The reality, and being from the South Bronx. I can't tell you how many preconceived notions people have about me, about my story, about my history, about my politics. I've had people tell me like, oh, I'm sure you don't care about agriculture. And I'm just like, actually, I'm on the agriculture committee and we have the markets in the South Bronx. I do care about agriculture, right? And so even those small kind of microaggressions that just exist everywhere are a challenge, because some people get to just go to work and show up and do work. And that's just not always true for women of color and women and in these spaces. So I think that's probably the goal and the challenges that I have in mind right now.
And that's something, that comment that somebody made to you, we wouldn't know unless somebody like you were in there having that comment made. So, but I love, what am I going to go off the cliff for? That's great. And Amanda, thank you. I know how busy you are, so I really appreciate you being here, and thank you. So
I'm happy to take questions if there are any, but I don't want to step on your program, so please feel free.
The only thing I'm wondering about is that we have one last thing that we're ending with, and I'm afraid we're going to start losing people, but I would love to, but Amanda, I would love to bring you back through the center and have you do a conversation. Would you do that?
Of course.
Okay,
Happy
that would be great, because then we'd have more time.
Amazing.
So.
And I'm gonna thank you to everyone who's been so kind in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and put my email in the chat, and
we're going to schedule a conversation with Amanda.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for having this conference and inviting me back. I'm so grateful to be here with you all, and I'll see you soon.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
So we have one more section that we're going to sort of have you hear and experience. But before that, I have to say thank yous. I have to say a huge thank you. I said a thank you to the president, but I want to repeat that. But I also want to say a big thank you to Meredith, because, and again, to her husband also, because none of this would happen. And any of you who have been interacting with Meredith know that none of this would happen without her. She's just been extraordinary in terms of the work she's done when I have these crazy ideas and she goes along with them. And I also want to say a thank you to Peter Mertens, who is the person that we report to. Peter's been an incredible supporter constantly. And thank you to Lipa, who's been amazing. This couldn't happen without her, because Meredith and I don't know how to do this stuff. She's been behind the scenes doing magic. And we did have more magic planned, but we weren't able to, the time just got away. And I think usually this conference is all day. So also thank you, Melanie, for helping. Who am I missing? Because I made it's like the Academy Awards. I made my little thank you.
Rachel Krohn.
Rachel, that's who the other person is. Rachel, the fabulous designer. And big, giant thank you to all of the women who spoke today. This has been such a wonderful experience. And thank you for doing it this way, because I know this isn't the easiest thing in the world. So yes, it would be terrific if you would put in the chat how you felt about this, because hopefully next year we're going to be able to do it in person, and then you get to eat, and that's a whole other thing. But we will do it either way. So but we have one last very special thing that we're going to end with, and you can keep going into the chat. And that is what people probably don't know, or some people do, is that Meredith not only does a great job at working with me at the center and being so completely committed, but Meredith is a singer-songwriter, and she works with her husband. And their group is called Violet. And I asked them, and actually this is terrible, but this only because of COVID were we able to do this, because we're doing this remotely. I've always asked Meredith if she would sing, but it's complicated at this event to set up a whole system. But because we're on Zoom, we can do it that way. So I am going to have you all have the pleasure of hearing Meredith. So, husband on the left.
Came to pay the spirit guide. Years of getting high on his past manipulation, strong deliberations, and enough to be satisfied. Take your problems to a deeper hole where the helpless are living an inherited great possum with your soul, they say. Home's where the heart is. You got what you wanted. Now what can you give late in the bed that you couldn't get back to the red? Oh no, no. Down by the riverside, the air is thick with suicide. All your righteous indignation and the eye of sweet temptation is going by. Heart's where the heart is. You got what you wanted. Now what can you give late in the bed that you couldn't get that cigarette? No. Arms where the heart is. You got what you wanted. Home's where the heart is. You got what you wanted, didn't you?
Thank you. And again, thank you, everybody. This has been a great morning, and we'll all keep in touch. And Meredith and her husband and band will be performing as soon as she can. So we'll keep you in the loop and let you know. Thank you all for being here.
And God bless
Thank
you, Eileen. Thank you, really.
Yeah.
She's our fearless leader here, and this is her idea, and we're all a little bit better off for having her in our lives. So God bless you.
Oh, thank you, Meredith. Thank you.
Bye.
So
Thank you.
Talisa,
This was great.
oh,
Yeah,
good.
turn off your
Thank
mics and say
you.
goodbye.
It can't be over.
Good
job, Meredith.
It has
I
to
didn't
be
think
now
I could
because-
stay on for 3 hours, but I
I know,
wasn't
but
gonna
you see,
leave.
yeah.
I can't miss 1 minute of this.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And Talisa and Meredith, we're gonna stay on.
Yeah.
This was awesome sauce.
Thank you. Thank you
So
so much. Next time.
good.
Oh,
Bye,
In the
everyone.
future.
Bye. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.